Ian Burns entered the house and was immediately struck by the aroma of fried chicken wafting from the kitchen. He hung his jacket on an antique hanger in the hallway just before his wife peeked out from behind the door jamb. "Hi, honey." Lisa greeted him in her usual bright, cheerful manner, the same manner that had only annoyed Ian lately. "Get yourself a beer. Dinner will be ready in 20 minutes. I made one of your favorite dishes." "Great," Ian replied, walking past Lisa to grab a beer from the fridge. If he noticed the offended expression on Lisa's face, he didn't bother to admit it. Lisa couldn't help but be stung by Ian's apparent refusal to kiss her in greeting. This was another example of how Ian had rejected her over the past 3 months. Earlier in the day, Lisa had lunch with her mother to consult with her about what could be wrong, which, given her mother's wild imagination, was probably a mistake. "He's trying to distance himself from you, honey. Did you do something to upset Ian? You're not having an affair, are you?" Lisa was shocked by this question. "Of course not, Mom. Why are you even asking such a question?" "Well, you must have done something, Lisa. Ian loves you." It was typical of her mother to side with Ian. But the question of whether Lisa had an affair raised alternative thoughts. Did Ian have an affair? The thought of it scared Lisa to the core. Mother and daughter finished lunch, and instead of returning to the office, Lisa called her boss, took a half-day break, went shopping and bought ingredients for one of Ian's favorite dishes. She was ready to fight for her man. As much as he hated it, Ian had to praise Lisa for the delicious food. "It was good." "On what occasion?" "Nothing special. I just thought that my man could use a good homemade dinner. I know we've both been busy with work and stuff, so I thought I'd like to express my gratitude for how hard you've been working lately. All the extra time in the office." Lisa's mention of his extra time at the office caused Ian instant alarm, but he suppressed it, swallowing the guilt. Lisa ignored the way Ian blinked and continued. "I have a surprise. I've booked a room for next weekend at that Ocean City bed and breakfast where we stayed last year. I thought we could spend a couple of days hiking along the coast again. It was so good last fall." Last fall, Ian thought, when I was in love with my wife. Before Roman changed everything. Ian couldn't come up with a good excuse fast enough to avoid a weekend with his wife, so he just grabbed the first one that came to mind. "I may have to work next weekend." Lisa was ready. "No, you don't understand. I called Joseph this afternoon and made him promise me that you would have a day off next weekend. I didn't want to lose the deposit for the room." Lisa knew Ian's boss, Joseph. During the 3 years that Ian worked at Genius Systems for Joseph, Ian and Lisa attended many events with Joseph and his wife. Joseph became almost like a beloved uncle to Lisa. Another reason why, if Ian divorced Lisa, his life at work would turn into a living hell. Unless he can make Lisa look like a bad guy. Exposing Lisa as the reason for their divorce would not be easy. Everyone loved Lisa. She was beautiful inside and out, and almost everyone knew that she was devoted to Ian. So, why was he trying to leave a beautiful, kind, loving wife? Because of another woman, of course. Ian met Carmen in line at a cafe across the street from his work. The brunette with the killer body was in front of him as they walked through the buffet. She filled her tray with the most expensive dishes. Ian paid more attention to her ass in those tight black trousers than what was on his own tray. When she reached the cash register, she rummaged in her purse, feigning bewilderment. "I know my wallet was here somewhere." The hungry customers behind Ian began to grumble. The brunette turned to Ian, smiling. "Could you lend me $15, please? I will refund the money next time." Ian was so fascinated by this woman's smile and her face. She was gorgeous that he didn't think about when the next time would be. He had never seen her before. He would have remembered that face and those beautiful breasts, and he blurted out, "Of course," into the lady behind the cash register. "Put it on my account." The brunette's smile widened. "Thanks." Ian had expected that to be the end of it and was glad when she sat down at his table. "I'm Carmen." Ian reached across the table. He shook her hand. Being a handsome man with the look of a man who has achieved success, Ian was not very surprised when the young beauty joined him. He was always lucky with the ladies, back in high school. In college, Ian was the guy his fraternity brothers stayed close to, waiting for them to get leftovers. There were always nice-looking leftovers. While they were eating, Ian looked at Carmen's left hand for a ring. Many years ago, before he met Lisa, Ian had an affair with a married woman. It didn't end well for Ian. The horny husband caught up with Ian one night near his apartment. Unfortunately, Ian wasn't much of a fighter. Even more unfortunately, he was a husband. Ian ended up with a broken nose, a thick lip, and 2 swollen testicles. The lip and testicles healed, but the craziest result of the beating was that Ian's nose was repaired, and his appearance only improved. Who said that life is fair? When Ian's father found out the cause of the injuries, the old man threatened to disown Ian if he brought charges against his husband. He also told Ian that it was time for him to grow up and settle down. Like many playboys, when Ian went in search of a wife, he avoided any promiscuous women he had dated and slept with up to that point. As a result, he met Lisa Collins at a charity event. Lisa ticked all the boxes. Beautiful, smart, loyal, with a gorgeous body and almost a virgin. A year after their first date, Ian and Lisa became husband and wife. Now, 3 years later, Ian's true nature has resurfaced. Within 2 weeks of meeting Carmen at the cafe, he began spending all the free time he could in Carmen's apartment. In 4 weeks, Carmen wrapped Ian around her finger and asked him when he was going to divorce his wife. Instead of talking to his father, Ian called Simon Foster, an old brother from the fraternity, for advice. The two of them were sitting in the bar chosen for the occasion. Here's the thing, I'm not even 30, and my life is starting to resemble the life of my parents. Ian started the conversation. I met this woman, Carmen, and she makes me reconsider my choice. Carmen talks about visiting nudist beaches and making love in warm Caribbean waters. Lisa talks about buying a house and having children. Ian noticed the change in his friend's expression. From a lascivious grin at the mention of lovemaking and nudist beaches to a frown when Ian used the words, have children. His fraternity brother understood the dilemma. He continued in the same vein, and if the scales had not tilted in favor of Carmen earlier, the next 2 sentences would have decided Lisa's fate. Carmen is fooling me. There is no lovemaking that she would not consider. While Lisa is making love and is a little shy after 3 years of marriage, Carmen's body is decorated with tattoos and piercings. Lisa can't understand how people can label their bodies like that. Ian didn't mention that Lisa gave up 2 years ago and got a small butterfly tattoo in a place that only Ian and her doctor could see. Lisa insisted that the tattoo artist should be a woman, and the tattoo itself really pleased and calmed Ian down for a while. Simon had the morals of a street cat and the maturity of a novice joining a fraternity. So, drop Lisa and have fun with Carmen until you get tired of her. You know you're going to leave her eventually. She's just like all those easygoing women you slept with at school. And don't tell me you're in love with this Carmen, I know you better. Ian thought about Simon's wise words, or what sounded like wisdom after 3 servings of ale and 2 servings of patron. The 2 brothers turned the conversation to sports. And then Simon bragged to Ian about all the pussies he used at work. They were getting louder, so an hour later the bartender interrupted them. Ian thanked Simon for meeting him, made plans to spend the weekend with him sometime in the future, and trudged home. When he woke up the next morning, Ian's head was splitting from a hangover and the taste of vomit in his mouth. What he could remember from yesterday's conversation made him realize that he needed to break up with Lisa. Listening to Simon's stories about loneliness, he became convinced that he had married too young and the wrong woman. The problem now was the same as before, and Simon couldn't help solve the problem: how to make Lisa to blame for the marriage falling apart. Ian called work due to illness. Lisa had already left, but left a sweet note on the counter next to the coffee pot. In typical Lisa fashion, she hoped he had a good time with his college buddy last night. Why does she have to be so damn cute? He thought. Why does she have to be so damn cute? Ian thought again, looking out the side window during their trip to the coast the following weekend. All his actions over the past few months being grumpy and sometimes downright nasty, ignoring her, avoiding bed, and when they were making love, just being selfish, all this did not help at all. He could not make Lisa lose her cool and attack him either verbally or physically. Lisa spent the 4-hour trip in a good mood. They arrived at a romantic bed and breakfast, and Lisa seduced Ian into making love on the first night. Ian had to admit it was fantastic. Lisa kept her body in shape. The time spent in the gym only accentuated her natural beauty. But still, she wasn't Carmen. They woke up in the morning, naked, with Lisa's arm wrapped around his torso. They had a good breakfast, packed a picnic lunch in Lisa's backpack. Ian's backpack had water, a bottle of Pinot Noir, their first aid kit, and a blanket before going camping. It had rained heavily and it was cold the night before, but by the time they stopped for lunch, the clouds had cleared. It's a great day to hike and reunite. They went out into the sun. Ian and Lisa climbed a cliff overlooking the ocean and stopped to admire the sheer beauty of the seemingly endless horizon. The path was cut into the rock, most likely by the original inhabitants of this land, and led down an 80-foot sheer wall to a sandy bottom near the mouth of the river. Looking up from the horizon, something caught Lisa's attention. They hadn't noticed how much erosion had occurred since their last visit here. Once the path had been at least 10 feet from the cliff edge, now it was 4 or 5 feet in places. Lisa bent down to look at the lily flower, no more than 2 feet from the edge, as the ground swam. Sliding sideways, Lisa caught on a protruding bush root, which prevented her from completely falling over the edge. But now her legs were dangling, scrambling in an attempt to find something to cling to. "Ian, help me." Lisa looked at her husband, who was frozen in place. "Help me," she screamed louder, trying to bring Ian out of his stupor. "Give me your belt." Lisa knew it wouldn't do her any good if they both fell off a cliff. Ian was just standing there. He wasn't frozen with fear. He was thinking. Maybe it was the answer to his prayers. An easy way to get rid of your wife. No angry boss or recriminations from their friends and family because he left his wife and found someone new. In fact, he would be perceived as unhappy, someone who needs consolation. They exchanged glances, which explained everything. Lisa realized that Ian was going to let her die. Ian realized that Lisa's last thoughts were her awareness of his deception. "I'm sorry." Ian meant it after all. He really loved her until recently. That was the last thing Lisa heard before the root broke, and she plunged into the sea from a height of 80 feet. Then her body was carried further away as a result of a combination of the receding tide and the flow of a nearby river. Ian caught a glimpse of Lisa before the low fog off the shore made it impossible to see anything. Perhaps she had already sunk. Ian was sitting on the ground and crying. Of course, an investigation was conducted. There were assumptions. Did that bastard push her off a cliff? People can be so cruel. Fortunately for Ian, the investigators were thorough and competent. They found Lisa's footprints where she left the trail. They found fresh erosion in the place where the bush was before it fell off. All the evidence confirmed Ian's testimony. Lisa left the path, came too close to the edge. The edge could not stand. She grabbed a root, but it was not strong enough to support her weight. She fell down and either died from the fall or drowned. No one will ever know that Ian stood by and let her fall. Lisa's body was never found, which is not surprising given the proximity to the river. The Coast Guard searched for 3 days, but without success. A week later, the backpack that Lisa was wearing that morning was found on the beach 20 miles north of where she fell, which confirms the assumption that Lisa did not die in the fall, and the hope that her body will somehow be found. But that never happened. The tragic story of the death of a beautiful young wife filled all the news outlets within a few hours. Ian wasn't surprised when he returned home on Sunday evening to find his disposable phone's voicemail filled with messages from Carmen. He left his phone turned off and locked in his briefcase, not daring to take it with him for the weekend with his wife. Ian listened to the messages, then called Carmen. Carmen picked up the phone after the first ring. "Oh my God, Ian. I heard what happened to her." Carmen never said Lisa's name, always calling her she, wife, or bitch, but today refrained from using a more derogatory term out of respect for the deceased. Carmen also tried her best to keep the joy out of her voice when she feigned sympathy. Ian wasn't the only person who believed that prayers were answered when Lisa accidentally fell off a cliff. Carmen tried not to consider the other possibility that Ian had pushed his wife so they could be together, although part of her was smitten by the thought that Ian could love her so much. Carmen chatted incessantly for a minute. "When can I see you? Is there anything I can do? Why don't you come over so I can comfort you?" Ian couldn't get a word in, and he had to interrupt Carmen's monologue. "Carmen, stop for a second. You know they're going to investigate the accident. I will be under close scrutiny for a while, at least until the investigation is over. We need to stay calm and stay in the shadows. Trust me, I want to see you as much as you want to see me. We just need to keep things the same for a few days. Let everything be quiet. just a little more. The good thing is that we can talk on this phone every night for as long as we want. Can you understand that?" It made sense, but Carmen had been waiting for Ian to leave Lisa for 3 months. It was so hard to wait a few more days, especially now that Ian was free. Anyway, it was harder because they couldn't meet for lunch or make love at Carmen's apartment, as they did whenever Ian pretended to be late at work. Ian wasn't a fool, so every night he spent in Carmen's bed, he spent the evening at work just in case the issue of Ian's overtime came up in Lisa's conversation with his boss. Carmen had a short temper and tried her best to stay calm while Ian explained that they would have to be careful for a while. She was already going crazy when Ian told her how Lisa had planned a romantic weekend at a bed and breakfast. She was so angry that she went for a walk last Friday night, and she was picked up by some big handsome guy who, it seemed, could turn her world around. In fact, Carmen was still in bed with the guy on Saturday afternoon. They were watching TV, recovering from the 5th or 6th attack of love, when the TV program was interrupted by news of a tragic incident with a local woman. Carmen kicked the guy out, put away takeaway boxes, beer bottles, and sheets before making the first call to Ian's disposable phone. Carmen tried her best to forget how the guy with his tongue and those thumbs made her squeal with pleasure, and all this before pressing her into the mattress. Ian brought Carmen back to the present. "Carmen, did you hear what I said? I said I'd do my best to get away. I'm going to try to sneak out in my clothes. There are reporters hanging around the parking lot. I'll be there on Monday at 9. It was one of the things Carmen loved about Ian. It was so damn easy with the guy. Carmen raised her hand, looking at her little finger, around which Ian was wrapped, knowing that before the end of summer there would be a ring on her finger. Ian was tense all day Monday. He hadn't slept much in the last 2 nights. Every time he closed his eyes, he could see Lisa looking at him like that, knowing that Ian would let her die. Ian realized that one of the reasons he had slept so badly last night was Lisa's scent lingering on her side of the bed. Lisa always used a light scent of Creed perfume, which was enough for Ian to catch the scent when he pressed against her neck, cleavage, or intimate area between her legs. But now that she was no longer sharing a bed with him, he needed to get rid of the lingering smell of the sheets, so he washed the bed linen. Having nothing better to do, he began to put Lisa's clothes, toiletries, and other items of bed linen and bathroom in plastic garbage bags, thinking that there would be no one in the master bedroom or bathroom. Ian left most of the photos in the living room, dining room, and study, in case Lisa's mom or friends came to see him. He removed 2 wedding photos in the hallway, replacing them with scenes of nature. The garbage bags went to her office. He would get rid of them after he cleaned out all the cabinets in her office. He closed the door before returning to the living room to pour himself a double shot of Jameson. At 8:30, Ian slipped out the back door of the apartment building and walked the 12 blocks to Carmen's apartment. Carmen opened the door with a smile on her face. There was nothing else on her. "Damn it, Ian. I've missed you." Carmen jumped into Ian's arms, wrapping her arms around his neck and her legs around his waist. "Come inside and make love to me. I missed you, and I really need you." Carmen bent down to grab his crotch, wrapping one arm around his neck. That's why Ian fell so deeply in love with Carmen, a woman with pure, genuine passion who never refused him, regardless of the request. Nothing was out of the question when it came to bed. "You don't have a wife to go home to. Tonight I'm going to show you how wonderful love can be." She said it with an evil grin as he threw her on the bed. "Come here. I promise to save all the bites and scratches below the neckline." Ian spent the night returning to his apartment before dawn. Ian put on his tracksuit in case anyone, no matter how unlikely it might seem, caught him on the street or entering the building. Although Ian hasn't dated any of the neighbors in the 6 months since he and Lisa moved into the complex, neighbors can be nosy and cause trouble, especially now that he's become a celebrity. It turned out that he was right. Mrs. Simpson, an elderly widow on the other hand, took a special interest in the comings and goings of the young widower. Ian looked in the bathroom mirror. Damn, his chest was almost bleeding from the bites. He grabbed a hand mirror. His back was covered with scratches. Ian smiled, thinking that this was exactly what was missing in his marriage: unbridled passion. Lisa's mother came by on Tuesday evening to sympathize with her son-in-law. It was a stressful visit. If Frances Collins noticed the missing photos from the hallway, she didn't mention it. They spent most of the short visit trying to find something to say to each other, but to no avail. As if things weren't awkward enough, Ian's cell phone rang while they were sitting in the living room. Ian tried to ignore it. "You're not going to answer?" Francis asked. Ian looked at the display. It was Carmen, who probably decided that it was now possible to call his regular phone. "No, just a few reporters or spam." The phone stopped ringing, and immediately the phone that Ian had left on the kitchen table started vibrating. It was obvious that the phone was buzzing in the next room, but they both chose to ignore it, as if ignoring the phone meant it didn't exist. Francis left soon after. Despite the fact that Carmen was very worried, Ian decided to spend Tuesday evening at home. There were just too many calls from reporters, friends, and family. So many people are either expressing sincere condolences or just trying to satisfy their voyeuristic urges to become part of a parody. Ian has arranged with Dana Williams, Lisa's best friend, to hold a secular memorial service for a month or two. Without a body, he doesn't have to worry about the farce of the grave. Ian started making sad faces in front of the bathroom mirror. He collapsed onto the mattress, but something was wrong. Ian sat up and sniffed the air. "Creed," he said it out loud. But he didn't smell it after washing the sheets. "Why now?" He sniffed Lisa's pillow, thinking it must be from her. He carried the pillow to the garbage chute by the elevators and returned to bed. Ian woke up the next morning and decided that he needed to clear the apartment of memories of Lisa. If anyone had given it much thought, they would have pretended to be too upset to keep reminding her. He was wearing boxer shorts when he entered Lisa's office. He looked around. Something had changed. He somehow sensed her presence, as if she had spent yesterday working in this room. Ian's logical brain understood that this feeling was just his conscience combined with a small amount of paranoia. Then he understood why there were 3 photos of him and Lisa on the wall opposite Lisa's desk. Ian looked at the photos. Each photo was taken during their annual anniversary vacation. Ian couldn't remember when she edited these photos, but then again, he didn't spend much time in her office, but maybe that's why he felt her presence. He grabbed a plastic bag to put the photos in after taking them out of the frames. Then he began to clear the table. When did she put their wedding photo on her desk? It was a smaller copy of one of the photographs he had taken from the hallway. He spent another half-hour filling garbage bags before deciding it was too early to deal with it all. He went to the kitchen and opened a beer. Ian was sitting in his underwear, drinking a second bottle of beer and watching some dumb morning talk show, when the bell at the front door brought him out of his stupor. "Who is this?" He expected it to be another reporter. "This is Carol. Can we go up?" Carol was another of Lisa's best friends. She had several of them. Cursing softly, Ian pressed the button to unlock the front door before putting on his robe. As he passed by, he made sure that the office door was closed. Less than a minute later, there was a knock on the front door. Carol and her husband were standing in the hall with sad expressions on their faces when Ian opened the front door. Carol had a platter in her hand. "Ian, we didn't want to bother you. We just thought we'd come in and leave something to eat. I remembered the last time you and Lisa came to dinner. You were delighted with my lasagna." Ian opened the door wider and stepped aside to let them in, thinking it was his only way out. Carol stepped back, but held out the dish. "No, we'll leave you alone. Just take the plate." Carol said those words, but it was obvious that she was having a hard time controlling herself. Ian took the plate and watched as they turned and walked down the hall to the elevators. He couldn't hear what Carol said to her husband after they left. "This poor guy. It's almost noon. The guy is still in his bathrobe and smells like beer. He must be completely devastated." Ian called Carmen at work. "How about I come over for dinner tonight and stay the night? I'll be there at 6. Carmen was delighted and agreed to go to Sammy's for ribs, French fries, and cabbage salad. The two of them spent the night in her bed. Ian woke up early, ran home, and got ready to go to the office. While he was shaving, something caught his attention. Lisa's hairbrush was on the makeup table in the corner of the bathroom. He could have sworn he dropped that comb into one of the bags. Ian picked her up and carried her to the office. Throwing it into one of the trash bags, Ian looked down into the trash can, which he could have sworn he had emptied yesterday. There was a crumpled piece of paper inside. Ian picked it up and read 2 names written in Lisa's handwriting, Peter and Darlene. Ian sat down in Lisa's work chair and recalled that night almost 4 months ago. It was a week before he met Carmen. Lisa and Ian have finished watching some silly novel. There, the couple got married, and the lead actress, Kate Hudson, is pregnant. Lisa was lying on the couch with her head in Ian's lap. She looked into his eyes. Have you thought about having a baby? Ian stroked Lisa's blonde hair. Yes, I've thought about it. But don't you think we're still young for such commitments? Lisa sat down, laughing. Are you young? Ian, you'll be 30, even if I got pregnant today. I'd be 27 at birth. We would have been older than either of our parents when their first child was born. Ian, when talking about parenthood, had the same attitude as he had towards life with wacky humor. Well, I'm really looking forward to whatever it takes to get you pregnant. Lisa slapped his chest and laughed. I'm serious. You want children, don't you? You always said we could have two. Ian didn't answer right away. After too long a pause, he hedged his bets. What about your job? Lisa wasn't going to let Ian off the hook. My job will give me a 3-month vacation with 3/4 pay. Come on, please me, and I'll make it worth your time. What will their names be? Ian had run out of excuses, and besides, the idea of a bribe sounded tempting. He decided to play along. Peter is for a boy, in honor of your father. Darlene, if it's a girl, in honor of my mom. Lisa smiled. She liked those names, but especially liked that Ian had given up. She pulled off Ian's shorts and gave him his reward. Now that Lisa was gone, Ian stared at the names on the piece of paper, and a chill ran down his spine. Ian was late for work on Thursday after a 3-day bereavement leave, went into the office and had to endure the sympathy of his colleagues. His receptionist, Joan, was crying while hugging him. His boss, Joseph, looked like he was holding back his own tears when he spent 15 minutes telling Ian how much Joseph and his wife would miss Lisa. People kept coming up to his desk to express their condolences, and it became harder and harder to pretend to be sad. Ian was almost on the verge of not answering his phone because he often got calls from reporters. Thank God they didn't have his work number. Genius Systems, this is Ian Burns. Ian answered the phone, hoping that it would be a new client who could distract him from thoughts about his personal life. I know you let her fall and drown. That was all the voice said before it switched off. Joseph chose this moment to drop in on him. Damn it, Ian. You look like you're about to pass out. Come on, let's go to the break room. I'll get you a soft drink or something. Ian let Joseph take him to the break room. With a movement of his head, Joseph silently signaled to the two ladies in the room to leave them alone with Ian. The ladies understood and left the room when Joseph mouthed, "Thank you. I know it was hard for you. I can't imagine what you're going through. Do you need more free time?" No, I was going crazy in the apartment and thought that being busy at work would be the best thing for me. I think it can be done this way. I have an idea. Leave town for 2 days next week. Your choice. You can fly out on Sunday and spend a couple of days in Phoenix. Come back to the office when you're ready. Ian decided it was a great idea to leave town and asked Joan to book him a plane ticket, a car, and a hotel. When Ian showed up at Carmen's apartment after work and told her he was going away for a few days next week, Carmen was furious. You're an asshole. What's so important that you need to leave town? Ian did his best to explain that this was his job, but Carmen wouldn't listen and kicked him out of her apartment. Ian thought about knocking on the door for her to let him back in, until he realized that this would only make the neighbors notice the recent widower, whose face was all over the weekend news, standing in front of the door of a young single woman and begging to be let in. Ian turned around and went home. As soon as Ian walked through the door, he felt Lisa's presence again, and a chill ran down his spine. He turned around and went down to the pub to have dinner and drink a couple of mugs of ale. Meanwhile, an enraged Carmen remembered the attractive guy from last weekend and called him. Hey, big guy, this is Carmen. Remember me? Of course, darling. Are you calling because you need a rematch? Yeah, get your sweet ass over here. Do you remember where? I can't tonight. I have a school friend visiting. How about tomorrow or Saturday? Carmen couldn't believe the words that came out of her mouth. Take him with you. It might be fun. Carmen has done a lot of outrageous things in her time, but everything that happened before tonight will seem trivial compared to this. She almost felt guilty about cheating on Ian, but she justified it by saying that Ian was cheating on his wife. Besides, he didn't pay enough attention to her, and she would make it up to Ian next Tuesday night when he returned. If she's able, if it doesn't hurt too much. Ian finished his third IPA and went back to his apartment. He called Carmen, but she didn't answer, and he didn't want to leave a voice message, so he hung up. 10 minutes later, his phone rang. It was Carmen. "Ian, did you call?" "Yes, baby. May I come over?" "Not today, Ian. You've made me angry, and maybe it's time for you to think about how hard it is to wait for you. I waited while you were married, and now I'm sitting here all alone because you're going on a business trip. Not before Sunday. I could spend tonight and the next 2 nights with you." "No. We'll talk tomorrow." Carmen ended the conversation and went back to what she was doing before the phone rang. "Who was that?" the guy asked. "My boyfriend. I called him back just to make sure he wasn't coming tonight." "So, where were we?" Ian looked at his phone and swore. After opening another beer, he made a decision, but he would wait until morning to call Carmen and tell her. He undressed and went to bed. As soon as his head touched the pillow, he smelled Creed. Ian jumped out of bed, damn, and tore the sheets off the bed. He ran to the kitchen to get a garbage bag, threw sheets, pillows, and a mattress pad into it, even a blanket. Crossing the hall, he opened the linen closet and put an extra set of sheets in his bag, dressed, and headed to his car. Ian drove to Walmart, but before entering the store, he drove around the back, where he found dumpsters next to the loading dock. Ian threw the bag in the dumpster and was returning to his car when the guy at the loading dock screamed, "Hey, buddy, you can't throw your trash in there." Ian ignored the guy and drove to the entrance of the store, went in and bought new pillows, sheets, and a blanket. A Walmart employee swore a few epithets at the ass, then looked into the dumpster to see what the guy had thrown away. From time to time, he tells a story about what he found in the bag, and no one who has heard this story has ever come up with a reasonable idea why the guy throws away perfectly good, clean bedding. Early Friday morning, after another sleepless night, Ian dialed Carmen's number, trying to catch her before she left for work. Carmen answered the phone in a sleepy voice. After all, she had only slept for 4 hours after kicking out 2 studs at 2 in the morning. "What do you want, Ian?" Carmen wanted to sound upset by making Ian stand on tiptoe and kiss her proverbial feet. "What I want is for you to move into my apartment tomorrow. I'm taking the day off to get the rest of Lisa's shit out of here. You can move. I need to go to Phoenix for 2 nights, but only for 2 nights. I'll be back Tuesday evening." Carmen was in high spirits when she heard the words, "when you move in." She hoped it would happen soon, but it turned out even earlier than expected. Her lease was due to expire at the end of next week, and she didn't want to extend it. Driving past Ian's complex, she couldn't believe how good it was. She imagined living there. There was even a swimming pool and a gym. It was all much nicer than her crappy apartment building. In high spirits, but knowing how to get the guy off balance, she replied, "Let me think about it. I'll call you tonight after work." "Please, Carmen. You'll see, we'll be a great couple. Just give us a chance." It took all of Carmen's willpower not to burst out laughing. The guy was hooked like a fish on a fishing rod. "I'll call you tonight, Ian." She ended the conversation. This is the second time she ended the conversation without telling Ian that she loved him. Ian spent 3 hours on Friday morning preparing for his trip to Jefferson Industries after Joan emailed all the materials Ian needed for the meeting. He spent the rest of the day searching every drawer, closet, and anything else he could find from Lisa's belongings. Ian spent that evening filling bags. From time to time, he would come across some souvenir from their life together. "There must have been a time when we were happy," he thought to himself, although he hated to admit it. At 7 o'clock on Friday evening, Carmen called from her car to be let into the building. Ian rushed downstairs and helped with her 2 suitcases. "You can help me with the rest of my stuff later. My lease ends in a week from today, so we have time. The furniture was in the apartment. We don't have to worry about heavy things." Carmen kissed Ian on the cheek and smiled as she entered the elevator. "I thought you got rid of all her stuff?" Carmen was in the bedroom, putting her things in the cupboards and chest of drawers. "What are you talking about? Everything that belonged to Lisa has already disappeared." Ian was already wondering if this was a mistake. Wherever Carmen went in the apartment, she made some remarks about how everything should be different. Ian kept saying, "Whatever you want," and continued to watch the baseball game. He had told her which chest of drawers to use in the master bedroom, and now she was grumbling at him from there. Carmen entered the living room and stood in front of the TV. "That's what I'm talking about. It was in one of the drawers." Carmen held up the most beautiful pair of underpants imaginable. "You always told me that your wife is a prude, No prude has ever worn such a thing. Carmen threw them in Ian's face. He took a breath and couldn't believe it. The smell of Creed, just a hint. When will it finally stop? He thought. She never wore them. Even Ian understood that it was unconvincing, but he knew for sure that it was true. He couldn't remember Lisa wearing them. As she claimed that the thong was uncomfortable, Carmen looked at him as if he had grown a third eye. Bullshit. Carmen recognized the smell. It was Creed. The same perfume that Ian bought Carmen a couple of months ago as a gift. Now she knew why. It was the same fragrance that his wife used. Ian didn't want to be caught, so he gave his girlfriend the same fragrance that his wife had. Very clever. This only made Carmen even angrier. You're a jerk. Carmen returned to the bedroom to finish unpacking. Poor Ian spent the first night together with Carmen, trying to make love, and was rejected. They spent Saturday picking up the rest of Carmen's belongings from her apartment, doing their best not to attract the neighbors' attention. Ian had a 2-hour flight on Sunday, and Carmen finally let him make love to her in the morning. By the time Ian left the apartment, he was sure he had made a mistake. But how to get rid of it? Ian had no idea that his fun had just begun. He threw his suitcase into the back seat of the car and started to drive out. Something was wrong. When he got out and went to the passenger seat, he found a flat front tire. After calling customer support, Ian cursed himself when the dispatcher gave an estimate of 2 hours before the truck could get there. Ian decided to try to change the wheel after thinking about it. How difficult can it be if some greaser can do it? Ian assembled the jack according to the instructions in the instruction manual before lifting the lid to get to the spare tire. There was an envelope on the spare tire with his name on it. Although he was in a hurry, curiosity got the better of him and he opened the envelope to read the letter. It was from Lisa and read, Ian, my love, if you are reading this letter, it means that you have a flat tire and you are probably upset right now. I hope you feel better knowing that you have a woman at home who loves you. And when you get home, I'll be happy to pour you a drink, give you a massage, and maybe something else. With all my love, your wife, Lisa. Instead of making him feel better, the letter angered him even more. What's the worst part? The letter smelled of Creed. Ian returned to the instruction manual, read the instructions, and finished the job of replacing the tire. Now he will have to hurry up to catch his flight. Joey Bronkowski had half an hour left before the end of his second day as a TSA agent when he noticed that the guy in the security line was nervous. Remembering his training, he watched the guy keep fidgeting. Looking closer, something didn't add up. The guy was dressed like a businessman, but his hands weren't businessman's hands, dirty and stained with grease. Plus, Joey thought the guy looked familiar. Could he have seen his face on one of the watch list posters in the locker room? Something rang in Joey's head. Ian put his carry-on bag on the conveyor belt before getting ready to go through the body scanner. He had only 15 minutes left before the gate for his flight closed. Faster, faster, he said to the woman in front of him, who seemed to suddenly remember that her keys were in her pocket. Ian tried to get around her, but she looked at him, said, "Excuse me," and I didn't let him get ahead of me. She finally passed. Ian handled himself and stood waiting for his bag to pass through the X-ray machine. "Sir, is this your bag?" Ian looked up and saw a TSA agent with his bag. "Yes, what's the matter?" Joey was pleased with himself. He knew there was something wrong with this guy. "Sir, please come here. We'll take a look inside." "Look," Ian began in an angry tone. "I only have 10 minutes to catch my flight. Can't you molest someone else?" The warden overheard the conversation and came closer. "Bronkowski, what do you have?" Joey pointed at the image on the screen. The warden made a face that could only be interpreted as concern, then turned to Ian. "Sir, come here." Ian was going to start yelling at this new guy, but changed his mind at the last second. Maybe he can get it over with faster if he keeps his mouth shut. Unlucky, so unlucky. When Joey examined the travel bag, he opened a side pocket on the outside of the case, a pocket that Ian had never used. Ian watched in horror as the agent pulled out a large sharp object that looked like a knife. Damn it, Ian thought to himself. Lisa's letter opener from her office. How the hell did it get into my bag? What Ian said out loud was, "I didn't put this in my bag." "Sir, did someone else pack your bag, or was it out of your control for a while?" Ian couldn't admit either. "Then please come with us." An hour later, Ian left the exam room and was allowed to go through security, but only after a very awkward strip search and a stern lecture from the police about what would happen if he got on the suspended list, if he ever tried to go through security again with a prohibited object. Joey Bronkowski received a big thank you with a letter in his personal file for his vigilance. Of course, Ian's flight took off over an hour ago, and he went to the service desk to rebook his flight to Phoenix. Unfortunately, the next available flight was only at 8 in the evening. Ian sat in the airport bar for 4 hours and drank 3 double Jamesons. Upon arrival, he checked into his hotel just after 1 o'clock in the morning. He felt like shit. He stumbled into the room, turned off his phone and disconnected the hotel phone, just in case. Bang, 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 someone was banging on Ian's door. He got out of bed. The clock showed 3:30, and went to the door, looking through the peephole to see the lady who registered him. He opened the door a crack. "What's the matter?" "I'm sorry to bother you, Mr. Burns. Your wife has been trying to reach you. She says it's an emergency, that the apartment is flooded. She told me to call her." "What the hell?" He blurted out automatically. Ian thanked the lady, turned on the phone again and called Carmen, thinking, why would Carmen call me and pretend to be my wife? It was the only explanation he could come up with for such a crazy message. Maybe the roof of the building was leaking. Carmen's phone rang 6 times before she answered it. She didn't seem happy to be woken up. "What?" That's all she said. "Carmen, have you tried to call me?" "Ian, it's 4 in the morning. Why would I call you?" He was about to tell her that he had received a message that his wife had called when he realized that it sounded crazy. "I'm sorry, baby. It must have been a bad dream. Good night." Ian ended the conversation before he heard Carmen say, "Asshole." Ian never fell asleep again. The porter's words kept him awake. She said it was an emergency. There was water everywhere. At 5 o'clock, he finally got out of bed to make a cup of coffee. He spent the next 2 hours watching the sports talking heads on ESPN chat about all sorts of nonsense before taking a shower and getting ready for his meeting. The CEO and operations manager of Jefferson Industries were waiting for him when he pulled up in a rented car. Ian looked as bad as he felt. His head was pounding, his ears were ringing, and he was trying his best to stay awake. The client knew that Ian had recently lost his wife and was willing to give him a break for wasting most of the meeting on Monday morning. The CEO eventually sent Ian back to the hotel, promising to reschedule the meeting soon, then called Joseph and told him not to send Ian again until he took "Pull Yourself Together." Ian drove back to the hotel with the firm intention of collapsing into bed and getting some sleep, then returning home on a booked flight on Tuesday afternoon. Instead, his phone rang as he was settling into his room. It was Ocean County's lead detective investigating Lisa's death. He informed Ian that neither the county coroner nor the district attorney were prepared to rule Lisa's death an accident. The detective asked Ian to return to the police station to answer a few more questions. "To be honest," the detective said, "we were ready to sign the agreement until we received an anonymous call claiming that there was a witness who swears that he saw you push Mrs. Burns off a cliff. We would have thought it was a hoax, but this man seemed to know so many facts. I'm sure we can clarify this if you come back and analyze the events with us." To say that Ian was worried would be an understatement. He knew he hadn't pushed Lisa off a cliff, but how many times had innocent men been convicted? In any case, the trial would be expensive and would delay the payment of life insurance. Ian went down to the bar and drank too many pints and too many shots of tequila. The bartender finally interrupted him when he became loud and belligerent. Heading back to his room, he spent an hour throwing up alcohol, that's all instead of a good night's sleep. Carmen's Monday was better than Ian's, but not by much. Last night, something kept waking her up every hour. As soon as she fell asleep, there was some kind of quiet buzzing, but only for a few seconds, long enough to wake her up, but not long enough to track where the sound was coming from. Finally, waking up every hour from 10 to 2, she put cotton wool over her ears and was already asleep when Ian called at 4 and asked his crazy question, "Have you tried to call me?" Carmen arrived at work on time, but due to lack of sleep, she made several mistakes, which were quickly discovered by her boss. After the second mistake, Carmen received a beating and a warning. Monday night was no better. In fact, it was much worse. When she was talking to Ian, he was drunk and incoherent. She tried to fall asleep at 9, but by 11 the damn buzzing started again. Carmen put cotton wool in her ears again and fell asleep again. She had no idea how long she had been asleep or what time it was when she felt someone's presence in the room. The room was dark, but there was enough light to make out the woman standing at the foot of the bed. It was supposed to be a ghost, dressed in a white robe, white face, long hair hanging down to his shoulders. Looking closer, Carmen saw that the woman's hair was wet, and then she realized that it was Lisa Burns. "What do you want?" Carmen's voice was barely audible, her throat constricted with fear. Was it an answering smile or a malicious grin? The woman didn't answer, and Carmen ducked under the covers. "He killed me, and he's going to kill you, too." The woman's hand reached out to Carmen. Carmen pulled the blanket over her head, shivering and praying for the first time since she was a little girl. Time passed, 10 minutes or 2 hours, Carmen couldn't tell. But when she finally plucked up the courage to pull back the covers and look, the vision disappeared. Or was it real? Carmen got out of bed, slowly moving from room to room, turning on every light in the apartment, slowly looking into every closet, under the bed and behind the sofa. She headed to the kitchen, taking out a bottle of wine from the refrigerator. Peering into the closet, Carmen reached past the wine glasses and grabbed one of Ian's pint glasses. Ian's phone was ringing. It was 8 o'clock on Tuesday morning. "Hello?" At that moment, he was almost afraid to answer the phone. Nothing good had come out of the last few calls. "Ian," it was Joseph. "What the hell is going on?" "I just got off the phone with Mr. Fairbanks from Jefferson. He said you wasted his day yesterday."
I'm sorry.
That was all he could think of to say. "That's not all. A detective called me yesterday. He wanted to know if I thought you were capable of killing Lisa." I told him, "No way. But why are they asking questions? Is there something you need to tell me?"
No.
"I swear I didn't kill her, Joseph. It was an accident." Okay. You better talk to this detective and figure this out. Take tomorrow to go there. Then, on Thursday, see what you can do to calm the people in Jefferson. Or should I send Halstead? Halstead was always trying to steal Ian's accounts. Now Joseph was hinting that Halstead should take over the management of Jefferson's account. This was almost 7% of the yen's compensation. Ian was infuriated by the mere fact that he heard this sentence. "Don't do this. Give me until the end of the week. I'll take care of this detective and Mr. Fairbanks. I like you, Ian, but I can't afford to lose Jefferson's account. Fix it." Joseph ended the conversation. Ian had 2 hours to catch his flight, but he got there with 5 minutes to spare. On the flight, he bought several of these small bourbons from the stewardess. She almost refused to serve him because he didn't look good. Twice already, Carmen had heard the phone ringing somewhere in the apartment. When it rang a second time, she found a disposable phone in the jacket pocket of one of Ian's coats. Carmen answered the phone. "Is Ian there?" It was a woman who called. "Who is this?" Carmen couldn't believe it. This scumbag had another girlfriend? "Tell Ian Janet called," and hung up the phone. Carmen looked at the call history. Ian must have cleared it. But she found 2 messages from the same number that just called. They came on Saturday. "Thank you," and "Find my panties," both with a dozen emojis of love and kisses. It rained all Tuesday morning. The gloom did not improve Carmen's gloomy mood after a sleepless night and the fact that she found the phone in the morning. It wasn't even noon when she opened another bottle of wine and poured herself a glass. The TV was on. Carmen didn't pay much attention to what was going on. It was one of those silly daytime soap operas that her mother used to watch half the day until the dishes were packed and the laundry was done. When Carmen's father returned home from work, a quarrel began. Her parents shouted and swore. The memory of her dysfunctional family only made Carmen even more upset. Why do people stay together if they only make each other more unhappy? She thought to herself as she poured a second glass of wine. The question never answered itself, because 2 television actors interrupted her thoughts. A female actress slapped a male actor in the face and accused him of cheating. The actor laughed at the woman and confessed to his affair with a younger and prettier colleague. Carmen watched the scene in horror. Are all men such scum? She asked the TV screen. By the time Ian walked through the door 3 hours later, Carmen was finishing the last bottle. Ian dropped his suitcase on the floor in the hallway and was hit by an unexpected stream of poison that escaped from Carmen's mouth. "Hi, baby." These words came out of his mouth before the storm broke. "Your girlfriend called, you asshole." "What are you talking about? What kind of girl?" Carmen grabbed the phone and threw it at Ian's head. Don't play Mr. Innocent with me. I found the phone you used. The phone flew past Ian's head and crashed against the wall. For God's sake, I don't know what you're talking about. You're drunk. Carmen was getting hotter and more frantic by the second. How dare Ian try to talk himself out of it? She knew the rules of the game. Deny, deny, deny. He's been using a disposable phone to communicate with her for the last 3 months, and now he's trying to deny that he has another phone for another bitch? She ran to the place where the phone had fallen to the floor, picked it up and poked him in the chest. Here, just read the messages she sent. With 3 drinks on the plane and a lack of sleep, besides the disastrous trip and a lousy flight in a thunderstorm that made the plane shake in the sky like an aspen leaf, Ian had a hard time digesting what Carmen was screaming about. He needed a drink, but instead he was dealing with an irrational, crazy woman. Ian looked at the phone in his hand. He pressed the power button, but nothing happened. The phone was broken. Ian handed the phone to Carmen. You broke it. He went to the minibar to pour himself a strong drink, a 12-year-old Highland Park, and more. Carmen couldn't believe it. The evidence was gone. Now Carmen started screaming louder. You're a jerk. It was there, her messages to you. The call she made was in the history log. They were there. Ian finished the first glass and poured the second. You're crazy. There is no other woman. His voice pierced Carmen to the depths of her soul. Go take a shower and sober up. We'll talk when you're not drunk. Ian opened the sliding doors to the balcony and went out to get some fresh air and get away from this crazy woman. He had lived with Lisa for 3 years and had never experienced anything like this. He did not know how to cope with it. It's best to just leave. He started to close the sliding door when it slipped out of his hands. Don't tell me to sober up. Don't tell me you're not going to leave me for another woman. I saw the messages. You're going to pay. You bastard. I hate you. I'm going to kill you. Carmen pushed Ian in the chest. Under normal circumstances, Ian would have pressed his back against the railing surrounding the balcony. The railing was built according to the latest standards and was high enough that no one could fall. Under normal circumstances, but by a quirk of the universe, Lisa's pot of herbs was located right between Ian and the railing. As Ian staggered back, his foot caught on the edge of the pot, and he flew over the railing and descended 5 floors to the sidewalk below. Carmen screamed in horror as she ran to the railing and saw Ian's lifeless body below. She couldn't believe it, and it would be years before she forgot the look in Ian's eyes as he fell backwards, clutching at the air in a futile attempt to find support. Carmen started screaming, "Help! Help!" and ran to the front door, continuing to shout, "Call 911," before 3 or 4 neighbors opened their doors and came to her aid. 2 neighbors called the police on their phones as soon as they realized what Carmen was trying to say. Mrs. Simpson, the neighbor across the street, sat Carmen down on the couch and tried to calm her down with a glass of water. During the subsequent investigation, everyone admitted that it was a tragic accident, mainly caused by the unfortunate placement of a pot of herbs. Carmen would have received a suspended sentence for her participation, if not for one circumstance. A neighbor happened to be sitting on her balcony next to Ian's balcony when she heard screams and, looking back, saw Carmen forcefully pushing Ian, shouting, "I'm going to kill you." As a result, Carmen pleaded guilty to negligent homicide and was sentenced to 18 months in state prison. 3 months later. So everything I'm going to tell you is confidential, unless it's illegal? Gloria Turner, the psychologist, nodded in agreement. Even if it's immoral or unethical, as long as it's not against the law? Another nod in response to this question. The psychologist remained motionless with a notebook on her lap and a pen in her right hand, waiting for her patient to begin. I've always been Pollyanna. I don't know why, considering how stupid my mother always was, but that's how I looked at life, as if good things come to good people. But when I was falling off that cliff into the ocean, and my husband was standing there, letting it happen, something just broke. Lisa Burns took a sip of water. I hit the water and felt the tide carrying me out to sea. The water was cold. I knew that hypothermia would not take long, but I overcame the desire to fight the current, took off my shoes and backpack and swam on my back until the current stopped carrying me away. There was a low fog near the shore. I couldn't see the shore or anything around me, but I swam to where I thought the shore should be. That's when I heard old rock music on the radio. I swam towards the sound and couldn't believe it. There was a guy pulling a can of crabs out of the ocean. I do not know who was more surprised, me or him. Lisa started crying. He lifted me out of the water, helped me undress, wrapped me in a wool blanket, and took the boat back to shore. He and his wife fed me and took care of me. When the news was shown, we watched Ian cry crocodile tears. I decided to make his life a living hell until he confessed what he had done, and I decided to pursue Ian. Mr. and Mrs. Crane drove me back to town and booked me a room at a nearby motel using their credit card. When I think about this couple, I have to say that it helped partially restore my faith in people. Did you do anything to thank them? Gloria interrupted Lisa's story. Yes, Mr. Crane has a new outboard motor for his fishing boat, and Mrs. Crane has a new convection oven. They were chatting on the way back to the city, and I overheard their conversation. I was in the back seat, and I know they weren't hinting they thought I was asleep. I checked into my motel room and snuck into the apartment on Monday evening. It's funny, I was the one who objected to having a hidden key taped under the doormat by the front door. Ian insisted on it. Anyway, Ian usually sleeps soundly, and I thought I could move around the apartment without waking him up. It turns out that I had nothing to worry about. He spent the night with his girlfriend, whose existence I had not even suspected until that day. I placed a few souvenirs here and there to remind Ian how much we once loved each other, including hanging our anniversary photos in my office after I noticed that he had put away our wedding photos in the hallway. Then she sprayed some of her perfume on the sheets. I did something else that night that I would never have done before. I logged into Ian's work and personal email accounts from his laptop, which he left in the bedroom. I knew his passwords. He probably didn't know that, but I never spied until Monday night. That's when I found out there was a Carmen. She sent him an email after hearing the news of my disappearance. She couldn't reach him on the disposable phone they used to communicate, another thing I found out, and was worried about him. At least that's what she wrote. Lisa started crying remembering this. Gloria handed her a box of tissues. How much time do we have? Lisa asked Gloria. 2 hours, don't worry, you're my last meeting for today. Gloria knew that this session would be stressful for Lisa and did not want to interrupt it. Besides, Gloria couldn't wait to hear how Lisa had carried out her revenge. As soon as Lisa calmed down, she continued. I came back Tuesday night. I had to be quiet because Ian was there and asleep. I almost laughed out loud when I found a pile of bed linen in the hallway where he had thrown it. The spirits were working. I moved a couple of things and left. Wednesday night was better because Ian spent the night with his girlfriend. I could move around freely. I rummaged through the trash bags that Ian had filled and found a few things that I didn't want to throw away. It's amazing how what you thought was important no longer has value when your life has been turned upside down. I took a chance and grabbed my laptop, hoping Ian wouldn't notice it was missing. That's where I got really angry. I left my comb in the bathroom where he could find it and wrote the names of our future children on a piece of paper for him to find. Lisa told Gloria about the night she and Ian came up with the names. Now Gloria took a moment to wipe her eyes with a napkin. Gloria interrupted again. Wait, what about your mother? Didn't it bother you that your mother thought you were dead the whole time you were away? Lisa grinned slightly in response to this question. It was another revelation for me. I watched my mother being interviewed on Fox and CNN on the first day of Crane's stay. I was ready to call her and tell her the good news, but I watched my mother enjoy the attention she was getting. It was all because of her, not because of me. My father was my real parent until he died. My mother rarely paid attention to me. Oh, once or twice, I think she tried, but she never warmed to me. She loved Ian more than she loved me. I was trying to be a decent daughter, all that Judeo-Christian, honor your mother stuff, but mostly it was a facade on our part. Lisa paused. Can I have some more coffee? Both women got up to pour a second cup each. I'm not going to bore you with every detail of what I've been doing for the next few days. I actually called him at work on Thursday, changed my voice, and said I saw him let his wife die. I told the police the same thing a few days later. After reading his email, I had a copy of his itinerary, so on Sunday morning I flattened one of his tires and left a love note in the spare tire compartment. Oh, yes, I also hid a letter opener in the side pocket of his suitcase. After I found out that his girlfriend was moving in with us, I got creative. I bought a phone at Walmart and put it in one of his coats in the closet. I called this number when I found out she was going to be there alone and asked to talk to Ian. I told her that I was his other girlfriend and she should ask him to call me. I sent a message that I enjoyed our time on Tuesday night and asked if he found the panties that I left there. How she screamed. Lisa smiled, remembering how much fun she had when she was pissing Carmen off. The best part was to sneak into the apartment in the middle of the night and see her. It was after I called Ian's hotel and asked the receptionist to wake Ian up with the news that his wife had tried to contact him. Gloria couldn't help herself. None of this is illegal. In fact, I think it's pretty damn inspiring. From what I read in the newspapers, I understand that you are not accused of any crime. But I guess I feel a little sorry for Carmen. She was charged with negligent homicide, and she could end up serving several years in prison. It seems harsh. Lisa shook her head. Maybe she'll stay away from other people's husbands when she gets out. I wasn't going to do anything but separate them and force Ian to admit what he had done. I never thought it would end with Ian's death. Gloria, being a married woman herself, thought that this could serve as a lesson to other potential husband kidnappers. Perhaps Lisa was right. She nodded silently and let Lisa finish. I think if the police want to be outraged, they can make a big deal out of a molehill because I've been faking amnesia for 10 days. But they would have to prove that I didn't have amnesia, and they don't seem too interested in finding out where and why I was hiding. Gloria stopped taking notes and looked up. Well, Lisa, in this first session you gave me a great backstory. What do you want to get out of our future sessions? 3 things. I want to trust people again, to see the best in them. I've become jaded, and I don't like it. Secondly, I want to understand why Ian couldn't love me as much as I loved him, where it all went wrong. And thirdly, I want to be able to spend the $500,000 that I received from Ian's life insurance without feeling any guilt.